guys, Rich here from the RCNetwork.com, and this is my build review of the Team Losi Racing 8XE Elite. This is TLR's newest 1/8 scale 4-wheel drive electric buggy race kit. This video will show the progress of building the kit, things I noticed along the way, and things that make this one of the best new e-buggies on the market. Now, if you haven't already, check out my unboxing video of this kit, where you'll see exactly what all comes in the kit and how it's packaged from TLR. In this video, we'll be covering tools needed to assemble your 8XE Elite, supplement items needed to assemble your new kit, how the kit assembled including both positives and negatives, owner's manual, parts left over, and finally option parts included with this kit. Tools needed for the build is a wide range of hex drivers, starting with 3mm, 2.5 to 1.5mm, and a 0.050 inch. Nut drivers are 5.5mm and 7mm, and turnbuckle wrenches in 5mm and 7mm. Supplement tools that help the build but are not needed include needle nose pliers, shock shaft pliers, a 4mm arm reamer, 17mm wheel wrench, and a good set of calipers. Lubricants included in the kit are black grease, threadlock, 4000 and 7000 weight diff oil, and 32.5 and 40 weight shock oil. I added chapstick for building my turnbuckles and Protex Premier Blue O-ring grease for the shock cartridge rings. As with most kits, you start off with some of the tedious items first, including the differentials, shocks, and turnbuckles. Bag A starts off with the 3 geared differentials. You'll find all the parts in one main A bag for all 3 diffs, all separated into smaller bags to keep things organized. I suggest building one at a time, even though I pulled out all the parts for this video for each of the main bags. The parts are all top quality, from machine steel being used for the bevel gears and the 46-tooth spur gear on the center diff. Internal parts do seem to be a sintered metal, but they'll have a lot less stress versus the bevel gears. The sun gears are massive in these differentials, and fluid-wise, you're supplied with 1 tube for the rear being 4000 CST and 2 tubes of 7000 CST for the center and front. The diffs are nice and smooth, as you'd expect, and fully tightened, they're still 100% smooth. The owner's manual does state to measure the fluid using a scale. However, my scale did not go down to 1/10 of a gram, so I eyeballed it. Losi's rear diff is a bit different than most, with the teeth of the bevel gear being on the outside of the diff versus the inside. This moves the driveline to the far side of the vehicle in the rear to accommodate electronics better. This has been a standard with Losi's for a while now. I always like to mark the outside of my diff case with a silver Sharpie to keep my sanity. Traditionally, I always build shocks at the end, so bag B will be toward the end of this video. Bag C brings your favorite in mind, yes, turnbuckles. Once again, top quality parts, steel turnbuckles, nice rod ends, and steel pivot balls. I like to use chapstick to coat the threads to make everything assemble easily, and I needed a 5mm and 7mm wrench to make it all happen. The famous D-bag brought a ton in one bag, pretty much the entire front clip of the buggy minus the steering rack. Once again, I'd open one at a time, but I wanted a challenging build for you guys. Bag D had a ton of value, machined aluminum, carbon fiber, and lots of hardened steel. The parts really didn't disappoint on the D-bag. First order was dropping the front diff into the bulkhead. Pretty much only one way to put it in, so no reversed drive on this build. The front diff didn't call for any shims, so in it went. Removing the front diff will require removing 6 screws plus accessing that point. All attached, the C-hubs and knuckles are a good combination and very stout. The new A-arms have included carbon fiber inserts, likely to stiffen the arms. 6 screws hold each plate in. The outer hinge pin holes were perfect, but I found the need to ream the inner hinge pin holes a bit with a 4mm arm reamer. The first big bummer tool-wise was the use of a 0.050 inch hex driver for the set pins in the sway bars. In my opinion, there shouldn't be anything smaller than a 1.5 on a 1/8 scale buggy. All put together, the front clip is beautiful. It screams quality and elite, like the namesake. Machined aluminum, carbon fiber, and top quality materials. Bag E is even larger, making up the entire rear clip of this buggy, including the braces, wing, and wing mount. Top materials again, including lots of machined aluminum, CVD drive shafts versus the universals we saw on the front, and even aluminum wing buttons. Nice. The rear diff gets the traditional Losi cups, but instead of plastic cups, these are hard anodized aluminum. Be careful in the orientation of the non-round side Mark 2.0. Also, it is specified to place 3 shims on the X cup and 1 shim on the 2.0 cup. The kit included extra shims just in case. The pinion gear to the diff gets assembled outside of the bulkhead and dropped into the bottom of the diff box. In all, 6 screws close this diff case up, not to mention what's needed to get to that point. Not really an easy access diff. Overall, the rear diff and case is large and wide with that offset center coupler. The rear A-arms have plastic inserts versus the fronts with carbon fiber, likely because a little bit of flex was welcomed for traction. The outer hinge pins have flange nuts on each side, but they seem just a bit long in my opinion. The rear wing and supports went together great, all decent plastic to provide a bit of flex versus cracking. The support seems pretty tall though, so definitely meant for an outdoor track. Did I mention aluminum wing buttons? The last few steps was adding the rear sway bar and then the mud guards. I got excited seeing the mud guards and quickly installed them, but later had to remove them as they hid the screws to the sway bar ends. The rear clip comes stock with rear mounted shocks, meaning the shocks are actually mounted on the rear of the rear shock tower. With the entire rear clip complete, it matched nicely with the front. Top quality parts through and through. Bag F takes care of everything between the 2 clips. Center diff mount, motor mount, electronic mounts, battery mount, and lots of rubber bands. Once again, carbon fiber, hard anodized aluminum, and even an included 15-tooth pinion gear round out Bag F. I was quickly brought back to freshman year geometry with the foam triangles to help cushion the battery tray. Plastic L-shaped ends make up the rest of the tray sides. The center diff uprights are plastic and have separate sections to make the diff easier to remove by removing only 4 screws. The carbon fiber top plate plays off of the X in the name of the buggy. The center diff spun very freely, so no complaints there. Now for the rubber bands. You'll find 4 different sized rubber bands and 4 of each one. These are used to grip the motor you have selected for your build. I chose a motor that had an outside diameter of 42 millimeters, including the fins, and that's what I plan to use. This kit can mount motors from 40 millimeter up to 43 millimeter. More on this in the next video. ESC tray installed, battery straps installed. I just installed the 2 vertical straps for now, but it does come with a long horizontal strap. Last but not least, servo radio box installed. Bag G includes the steering rack, front brace, and parts to mount the front clip. Top quality parts include hard anodized Ackerman bar, steering post, and main servo saver tube. The steering rack went together in a traditional fashion. However, instead of a spring, there's a blue elastomer for tension on the servo saver. Mounting up, the stout posts are keyed into the chassis plate. Prior to mounting the front clip, you get a foam sticker to apply that acts as a seal for the open section of the front diff. The front center drive shaft is just a dog bone and comes with a rubber yoke to keep it affixed. I used a bit of grease to get it to slide through that yoke. The front clip is all mounted up. The machine top plate mounts nicely with several screws, and we have the beginning of a buggy. There's not much to Bag H: rear diff seal, rear center dog bone, and the receiver box cover, along with hardware to mount the rear clip. A few turns of the wrench, and we have what looks like an e-buggy. Everything came together quite nicely, and you can really see all of the top quality parts that goes into the Elite name. Now for one of the last steps, the shocks. So back to Bag B, the shocks, and what a great last step. In hindsight, these are some of the best shocks I have built before. Everything is top quality, including the shock bodies, caps, spring adjusters, and bottom caps, all being machined aluminum. All of the internals are pre-cut or machined Delrin like the pistons. These shocks have all of the same internals from front to rears, with the only difference being the bodies, shafts, oil, and springs. No added spacers or parts to be on the lookout for. I'm quite particular on shocks and always lay everything out to start my assembly line. Fronts use 40 weight and rears use 32.5 weight oil. I found that the rears used nearly every drop of that oil in the vial. The shock caps include one of the most stout gaskets, not just a simple O-ring. I found that flipping it from what the manual suggested fits a bit better, although it just might be the way the manual was pictured. A nice touch is that you do get right and left captured perch springs. mountings to align the screw when you mount the shock. Even though the manual states to mount the shocks with the bleeder screw facing out, I always mount mine inboard on the buggy. The action on these are amazing, and they bled very easily. The last official bag is bag I, which includes the yellow wheels, body clips, and wheel nuts. The wheel nuts are a serrated aluminum closed cap, which is a nice upgrade. As for the owner's manual, I found minimal mistakes or bobbles from an illustration perspective. After all, these manuals need to explain to a third party, the consumer, how to put this thing together. I always like to highlight as I go to reference back for this video to help out someone building this kit for the first time. There really isn't any written dialogue in the owner's manual, just multi-language icons, which the legend is located in the front of the manual. I'd preview those before building. Starting with bag A, I noticed that all three diffs do not require the washer holding the O-ring under the sun gears. I didn't notice the word optional till later. However, I didn't find any binding by using the washers. The manual states to use a scale that measures down to the tenths of a gram to fill your diffs. I didn't have that, so I eyeballed it according to the manual. Notice the rear diff weighs slightly more than the front and center diff. For the center diff, I had 2 additional spacers or shims that were not in the owner's manual, either in the center diff build section or later in the center diff mounting section. In bag B, the gasket under the shock caps is illustrated to have depth on the side that goes into the cap, but the gasket fits better, in my opinion, the opposite way. It just sat more flush. It would have been nice to have filling and bleeding instructions besides just this illustration. I think written instructions are a lost art these days in most owner's manuals. A big bummer is the use of a .050 inch wrench for the piston bolt. This should have been a 1.5 millimeter in my opinion. Bag C's instructions just seem to be oddly placed. At the top they picture the turnbuckles, but they're not in the same order below. You have to cross-reference the turnbuckle part number to make sure you're using the correct one. Both bag D and E requires a 3 millimeter hex wrench for the droop screws and the rear chassis brace screws. Couple that with the use of the .050, you have 5 wrenches for this vehicle. It would have been simple to have a 1.5 for the smaller ones and a 2.5 for these droop screws, bringing down the tool assortment just to 3 wrenches to work on your vehicle. The only actual mistake I found was on steps E10 and E12 of bag E. The rear turnbuckles get mounted from what seems on either side of the shock tower. Step E10 has the diff case pointed forward with the driver's side turnbuckles mounted to the rear and the passenger side mounted to the front. Even with the icon, they should have listed them to both be mounted on the front side. Step E12 has them grayed out and mounted on the front side of the diff case, although the image flipped from the previous. It was late at night and this step just did me in. Parts left over from the kit included all of the rubber spacers for the motor mount to mount a 43, 41, or 40 millimeter motor, a 15 tooth pinion gear, 4 metal inserts for the plastic servo horn including 25 tooth, 24, 23, and a 23S insert, the servo horn bolt, body clips, the 2 mysterious center diff spacers, and 4 extra shims for the diffs. 1 long battery strap, as I only mounted the 2 vertical straps for now. The option part bag was a nice surprise, as I didn't open it until I filmed this video. Inside was a polycarbonate rear wing, 2 diffuser braces, and the hardware. They include the rear carbon fiber arm inserts and the front plastic inserts to tune the flex of the arms, battery foam spacers, thread lock, double-sided tape, and a couple of tools. 4 additional front sway bars and 4 additional rear sway bars, the servo saver spring, 4 shock cap bladders for running non-emulsion shocks, and finally additional geometry pills marked 1 and 0.5. All in all, this kit is a winner to build. You get top quality parts and materials. You get top quality part materials like hard anodized machine aluminum, carbon fiber, and steel where it matters. The part fitment was top notch with minimal to no trimming needed to make things fit. The owner's manual was laid out great, although I wish there was a bit more dialogue inside. Now it's time to add my electronics, paint the body, and glue up some tires before hitting the track. So stay tuned for those videos coming up here soon. As always, if you like the video, hit the like button. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button and ring the bell to be notified anytime I upload a video. Till next time, my name is Rich. Thanks for watching.